Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're doing a video response to Majora. And the funny thing about this question was that it was actually my idea for him to do it for his table topics, which is like a type of series of videos that he does where he wants people to do video responses for him. So I guess for me doing a video response to him is kind of like doing a video response to my own question, which is kind of weird. But anyways, the questions for today happen to be a game that you did not beat until way late, or a game you did not beat as soon as you would have liked to, and finally, a game that you're still working through after all these years. I'll go more into it as we go along, but for the first one, we're gonna do a game you did not beat until way late, which is pretty self-explanatory. And that could imply like a shit ton of games, because it can basically be any old game that you just never played until recent years that you missed out on. So yeah, the choices on this one is a lot. I'm pretty sure it's more than 4. And the one I wanted to talk about today is a game that I actually did beat this year, and it's a game that belongs to a series that I really like, and I grew up playing a lot of the games, but for some whatever reason, I just never played this one until I suddenly got the urge to play it this year for whatever reason. But hey, I'm glad I did, because I ended up really liking it. And that happens to be The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap on GBA. So I don't think I need to make a big introduction about the game. I assume you know what it's all about, and of course there's the fact that this game was also helped out by Capcom, which is pretty interesting. So why exactly did I not play this one, since I always grew up playing a lot of different Zelda games all the time? So the first reason is that I never owned a GBA until way late. In fact, when I got my GBA, it was actually given to me by my cousin, and they didn't really have much games for it, and of course, I just didn't really see a lot of games I was really wanting to play at that time, because they gave it to me around the same time when I first got my PS2, so because of that, I was kind of more interested in wanting to play more PS2 games than I was with GBA games. So I never really played that many GBA games. In fact, there's actually still a lot to this day, and a lot of classic ones that I still never played much of. And this was one of those games until recently. And another thing that I thought was interesting about Minish Cap was that I didn't really know a lot about the game before I played it. All I knew was that it had a lot of mechanics that had to do with turning small, and that the final boss was not Ganon, it was actually Vati. And that was something I always found to be very interesting, because it's actually very refreshing that they managed to put a new villain into a classic series like this. And it reminds me of the very same reason why I love Mario Land 2 and the 6 golden coins, because the final boss was not Bowser for the millionth fucking time, it was Wario, and I thought that was really cool. I still wish they would make another game with that. So after all these years about knowing about it but just never playing it for a very long time, I can say that now that I have played it, is that I actually really enjoyed it a lot. I actually think it's a really good game, and I would even say it's a very underrated Zelda game for that. I don't really hear a lot of people talk about this one. Whenever people talk about their favorite Zelda games, this one rarely ever comes up. Hell, I even hear more people talk about the Oracle and Season games more often than this one. So like I always say, it's better late than never, but I do think that this is a game that I definitely would have loved the shit out of if I played it back when it came out, but I'm at least glad that I played it now and I can appreciate it. Alright, so the next question here is a game you did not beat as soon as you would have liked. Now, this basically sums up as a game that you probably played, but then it took way longer to beat than you really thought it would have taken, usually due to certain circumstances. Whether it be you lent the game out to a friend and they never returned it to you, but you still had your save data, or you rented the game a bunch of times and it took forever to get through, or the reason that I'm going to be talking about today is your system breaking down. So for that, I'm talking about a PS2, and I have a feeling that this might be a pretty big one to explain, so if this does go a little bit overboard with stuff, I do apologize. So the game happens to be the very first Xenosaga. So the very first PS2 I ever got with my own money was in 2005. Like I said, the very same one that I got around the same time as my GBA. And also, like I said, there was a lot of PS2 games I was really interested in wanting to play, and one of them being Xenosaga. And the very first Xenosaga game that I bought was actually the third game. Reason why I bought the third game and not the first two is because the store that I usually went to, they didn't have the first two. They only had the third one because it actually came out not that long ago at that time. So yes, I actually paid about like $49.99 for a brand new copy of that game, which is like insane to think about now, but you know, of course back at that time I wasn't thinking about that type of crap. So anyways, I played it for a little bit, and of course, it doesn't take long for me to realize that it is a little confusing, and there's a lot of stuff about it I don't understand, and I felt like I really should have played the first one, so eventually I did try to look for a copy of the first one, which took about like a couple months. So anyways, I played it for a little bit, and I got past the very beginning part after the Gnosis attacks, and my system breaks. So as you can imagine, I was pretty pissed about that, because one thing to keep in mind was that the PS2 model I had was a slim model, and I've had it since like, you know, like mid to late, like 2005. And I happened to get the console used, which was probably my biggest mistake, but, you know, I was a teenager, like, I didn't know any fucking better. So who knows what the person that had it before used it with. They probably watched, like, a shit ton of movies on it, and they also probably put, like, a bunch of Cheetos in, like, the disc tray. Because we all know that the quality control of EB Games and GameStop and all that is a complete joke, and they don't really fully test their systems out. But yeah, unfortunately the PS2 didn't really last very long, so then it wasn't until a few months later that I bought another one, and this time I actually made sure to buy it brand new, and this was in the year 2007. And I've had this PS2 until all the way to 2010, but here's the thing though. Xenosaga 1 is one of those games that I wasn't like hardcore, like actively playing it all the time. It was one of those games I kind of was playing a little bit here and there, mainly because there's a few parts in the game that kind of annoyed me. Like for an example, like there's like a boss fight where if you don't beat the boss with like the right character, then it gains all its health back. Yeah, that really pissed me off. So anyways, I got to the Song of Nephilim, which is like the worst dungeon in the entire game, and that shit took me forever to get through, and that's because my second PS2 dies. And like I said, it lasted me from 2007 to 2010, and for a PS2 that's brand new, that's kinda sad. So because of that, for the longest time, I had no idea why my PS2 died, but it wasn't until many years later that I think I might have found out why it died. So a lot of the games that I was playing, like outside of Xenosaga 1 during that time, were a lot of games that had a certain disc quality to them, called dual layers. So instead of going into like the whole nerd talk about what a dual layer is, to sum it up is that they're basically like DVDs, but they have like a gold tint to them, and for whatever reason they seem to be like a lot more harder to process on the laser. And just a couple games that I remember for a fact that were dual layers was not only Xenosaga 1 was a dual layer, but also games like Yakuza 2, Genji, Dawn of Samurai, and all like the Guitar Hero and Rock Band games. And yeah, by the way, I was like obsessed with Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and I played the shit out of them on my PS2, so that's probably like a big reason why my laser died like the way it did. And I also remember borrowing copies of God of War 1 and 2 off a friend of mine, and those are also dual layers as well, so yeah. I played quite a lot of those games on my PS2, along with like a bunch of other shit, so yeah, I think that's why my PS2 died. And it wasn't until like 3 years later that I would get another PS2, and it's a fat one, and it happens to be the one that I still have today. And I'm pretty sure it was 2013 or 2014, it was either one of the two, I finally managed to beat Xenosaga 1. So basically, it took about 7 to 8 years just to beat one game in this damn series. Like, what the fuck? And it took me like 3 PS2s just to do it too. So now I think you all understand why I think playing PS2 with original hardware can be so frustratingly bullshit sometimes. Because if it wasn't for my 2 PS2s breaking down, I probably would have been able to beat this game like way quicker. And to think I didn't even explain how like annoying it was to try to beat the Song of Nephilim after not playing the game for like 3 to 4 years, like that in itself was a struggle. But anyways, I think you all get the point that yeah, this is a game that I definitely should have completed a lot sooner than I did, but you know, it was just a lot of bullshit to get there. But despite of all that, I still really enjoyed the game and its story, so I guess it was kind of worth it. Alright, so yeah, I think that was a little bit of a long one, but don't worry, this last one about a game that you're still working through is gonna be a lot shorter, and this is one that also I could pick a lot of different games in here, for such examples being Lunar 2, Star Ocean 2, and ironically, the next one I'm gonna be picking here is an RPG with 2 in it, and that ever so happens to be Persona 2. And yes, I'm including both Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. So I know what some of you are thinking, if you guys seen a lot of my older videos, was that, well, didn't you praise Persona 2, like, quite a lot on your channel? Yeah, I have, but even though I never beat the games, that doesn't mean that, like, I can't, like, say anything good about it. Because even though I never beat these games, and I'm still, like, trying to beat them eventually, I actually do know a lot about, like, the stuff that happens after the point that I've gotten to. Like, I know the ending to these games and all, like, the crazy character moments that happen and all that kind of fun stuff. So the game is definitely spoiled for me, and normally you'd think that that would actually be kind of a piss-off, but weirdly enough, it actually kind of gives me more motivation to try to wanting to beat this game for myself, because even though I've only, like, heard about the stuff that happens, I've never actually seen it myself. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you may know what happens at the end, but you still want to see exactly how they tell it to you, because that's what makes storytelling really great. So I definitely can't wait to try and beat this one day, but the only problem is that it's one of those games that I have to be in the right mood to play it because it is a very difficult game, and of course right now, I kind of don't really feel like playing a game that's like really difficult right now, so it's one of those games that I've just been kind of playing off and on for like a couple years now, both parts by the way. But I think I will try and beat part 1 on PSP first before I try going more into part 2 on PS1, unless, you know, the PSP version gets translated. So yeah, that's one of many games that I've been working through for quite a while now, though it might be a while before I try and start working back on it though, but it's still a work in progress that I haven't given up on yet. So that's all I gotta say about my response video to Majority's table topics this time. So as always, you guys are more than welcome to give out your own table topic responses to him. I think that'd be really awesome to see more of them. And with that said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.